Oh, so we are talking about sustainability, the past, present, and future, embracing sustainable initiatives and practices in our diverse industry. And being the moderator on this presentation is Debra Knapke. She is, after 2 other careers in 1992, Debra turned her avocation of plant study and gardening into her full-time career. Known as the Garden Sage, Debra is passionate about gardening, sustainable garden design, and the natural world, and enjoys sharing knowledge through her life, through her writing, public speaking, and garden consulting in the private and public sectors. She has served on various local and national committees and boards that focus on education, the environment, and sustainability. She's championed those passions during her own 2-year term, 2024 to 2016, as honorary president of the Herb Society of America, and currently is the co-chair of the Sustainability Committee at GardenComm. In addition, she has mentored the future of the landscape industry at Columbus State Community College for 24 years. She loves being a gardener and has packed an amazing variety of perennials, trees, shrubs, and edibles into the 2/3 acre lot surrounding her home. So with that, Debra, I'm going to kick things off over to you, and you can introduce everyone on the panel here today. Oh, quick note before we started here, some housekeeping notes. If you have any questions, please put them in the questions and answer panel. We will get to those at the end of the presentation. If something comes up that is very relevant to the conversation that's going on now, we'll break in and ask that question. But thank you so much, everyone, for being here, and all of our panelists. Debra, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So this is the 3rd day, and we've heard from companies who are working on sustainable solutions with sustainable ingredients and packaging, local sourcing, and local supply chain. And honestly, this is exciting. I don't know about you, but I've been learning a lot. For this session, we are going to look at the communication side of sustainability, along with the practices and philosophy of what it is to be sustainable, where we've been, where we are, where we're going. The stars of the panel are Eliot Wadsworth, Casey Sclar, and Lois Vries, and they have come to the sustainability movement through different avenues. At this moment in time, Lois, as the creator and manager of the Sustainable Gardening Library, who offers vetted plant and garden information, Casey as the director of the Arboretum at Penn State, who is working with faculty who teach and students who go out and do the work, and Eliot as the owner of White Flower Farm, who guides customers on plant choice and care while dealing how to grow plants in a sustainable way. So with that, I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves, take a couple, 3 minutes, and talk about what are they doing now and how did they get there? What was their impetus, or what was that tipping point, that moment, that event or time when sustainability became a core value in their lives and they work to where they are now? So first, I'm doing this alphabetically, and then I'm going to switch it up. So Lois, you get to go first.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Deb.
My last name.
Okay. For those who don't already know, I'm the founding executive director of the Sustainable Gardening Institute and its library, a project that grew out of my work with the Garden Comm Sustainability Committee, which I chaired for 7 years before Deb graciously agreed to take over the reins. So thank you, Deb. The Sustainable Gardening Library is our core program. It's the only thing that we do. It's a free one-stop online resource for sustainable gardening, farming, and infrastructure information. I came to this in a roundabout way. During my tenure as chair of my town's environmental commission, I was the lead on our natural resource inventory and open space plan. And that's when I first learned how pivotal GIS technology could be, which is what we use as our library's platform. As a freelancer, like many of our members, I've written for national media as well as for business, trade, academic, and cultural organizations. And I had my own PR agency for 10 years. But my current work is my favorite because it combines my two most enduring interests, gardening and the environment. You had asked earlier, Deb, the tipping point. I can't say that there's a single moment or event when sustainability became a core value for me. It's kind of just always been there. But the tipping point for the concept of the Sustainable Gardening Library came out of frustration trying to vet articles for GardenComm's newsletter. There was just so much misinformation, lack of information on the internet. People were just copying and pasting from one another's websites with no research and no critical thinking involved. Meanwhile, I could see all these various organizations starting to do the same research that somebody else had just completed, but they didn't seem to know about one another's work, and they were all in their own little information silos. I went to a couple of sustainability events and discovered also that those that were just, their departments were just getting started. They were terribly underfunded, understaffed, and much of their work was just kind of glued onto their websites like Velcro. It was an unnecessary waste of time and talent. And people like us on the sustainability committee who needed access to the material just couldn't get at it or had no way to find out it was even there, that it even existed. So our mission basically is to change all of that through our library. And our vision from the beginning has been to include gardens from around the world, but scaling that big is going to take a lot more funding than we have right now.
Okay, thank you. I just saw in the webinar chat that they want the library link, and I can do that to hosts and panelists, but I can't seem to do it to everyone. So I'm hoping that Chris can do that for us. So I'm putting it in there and he can transfer it. All right, so next, Casey, same question. Your current job, how did you get there, and tipping point?
Well, what a long, strange trip it's been for me. So I come from a rather different and unique place. So I grew up a landscaper, and that's kind of where my start became in working with different people. I was very fortunate and blessed in that horticulture came to me early in life and kind of saved my life at a time when I was kind of drifting. And so I got to a point very early on in my career where I was a landscaper on a private estate. And then I was taking, after I completely flunked theater at a community college and actually had failed the class in philosophy of paranormal phenomenon. It was California, it was the 1980s. But in terms of that, to bring it forward, that person that I was carrying a private estate for was actually the gentleman who invented the tensiometer, the device that measures soil moisture. The botanical science classes that I was taking were taught by folks who were very influential and rose to be stars in the botanical science profession nationwide. And I was just lucky to receive that grounding in natural landscapes. But I was always the person who said, man, that plant that people are looking at now in the super bloom. And I was going, how do we achieve that in gardens? They would say, we study plants and botanical science. There's this thing called horticulture. So I went back to school and learned about horticulture, and then took that because I became the person that everybody brought their sick plant to. Toward the end of my undergraduate career, I went to work as a applied plant scientist and entomologist, and did that for several years. Went through 23rd grade and got my post hole digger degree. but then always wanted to give back to public horticulture. So I took a job at Longwood Gardens in Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, which is a garden that probably a lot of people here know about. Was in charge of integrated pest management for many years. And the study of integrated pest management, the discipline of integrated pest management, is really a great grounding in sustainability, because it really talks about all the different forms when we apply it of economic sustainability, community and health benefits, and then of course, obvious environmental benefits. And, you know, horticulture and public horticulture as we know it today is really an art, a science, a technology, and a business. So I worked and had more and more input into things like recycling programs and solar farm at Longwood and other sustainability initiatives. And so that tipping point for me has really kind of come probably 3 or 4 times in my life. It came first in probably 2004 and 2005 when I realized that, you know, to look through a lens of sustainability is really to look through a lens of that everybody, regardless of your background and your instincts, can come to. So you can gravitate toward economic sustainability if you happen to be fiscally conservative in that mindset. You can gravitate toward environmental sustainability and to social justice and equity if you come from a different mindset of community and health benefits and environmental. So back then we started to develop what has now become the Public Garden Sustainability Index that actually followed me from Longwood in my plant scientist interrupted to being executive director of the American Public Gardens Association, which of course is, you know, Lois was mentioning all these different botanic gardens and arboreta. So because I was an avid volunteer first, I stepped in and ran the association for about 10 years as its executive director. And during that time, the only thing that really followed me from Longwood was the Public Garden Sustainability Index, which continues to exist today. And so that second point of tipping point for me came in probably about 2011, 2012, 2013, when we were really starting to grapple with climate change and really in trying to speak to people regardless of their background about climate change. Sustainability again became that window that we could look at it through, and that lens that we could look at it through and get really common agreement that, you know, regardless of where you feel you sit on climate change as a science and climate change and its impacts, that you can really dive into sustainability and take sustainability. So fast forward many years, and I had the amazing opportunity to come here to be the H.O. Smith Endowed Director of the Arboretum at Penn State, which is a wonderful fusion of everything that I've experienced in my life. So I get to come back to higher education. The Arboretum is one of the foremost visited places in Center County. It provides everything that Penn State, as one of the oldest by 10 days, it is the second oldest land grant university in the US. And we provide teaching, research, service, and outreach for hundreds of thousands of people who come here every day. Throughout the year. We're a very visited place for the community. And we're really touching on all those aspects of teaching, research, and service to everyone to try to lift everybody up. And so whether it's a 6-acre pollinator and bird garden that we have that is unlike any other peer I've seen in any other arboretum or public garden, we have a lot of other things that we view a lens here in the center of Pennsylvania through watershed protection and other things, but we're also involved in the aspects of earned revenue and programming and membership and greater philanthropy, and also research surrounding the importance of threatened pollinators, insect conservation, native plants, and sustainable adaptable plants. So my last tipping point has really come recently in coming to Penn State, and it gets at what Debra was talking about earlier, which is this kind of younger generation that we talk about. And, you know,
Well,
do people really get
though.
sustainability?
You're getting ahead. I'm going to ask you more about that later. So let's save that.
So we're engaging now across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania regarding sustainability, and it's such a thrill to be able to do that. So I don't want to bury the lead, but I just did. So I'll cede the rest of my time to Eliot.
No, that's okay. We'll get to that. So Eliot, and so you're, your past and your tipping point. And so you're in a family that owns this fantastic garden center, purveyor of plants, and you left, but you came back.
Yeah, I'm Eliot Wadsworth. I'm the owner of White Flower Farm. We're a retail nursery in Connecticut, mail order nursery, which is sort of a funny old-fashioned sounding term, but it's what we are. And Deb, like you said, I grew up around this business and this place, not really in it. Went away and did other professional things. I worked in the music business for 10-ish years, and then moved back to Connecticut with a very young family in tow, and a little bit of a sort of succession vacuum at White Flower Farm. So I came back to work at the company full time as a bit of an experiment, and it's worked out very well. And as far as sustainability and the tipping points, I mean, for me, it's been less a tipping point than just a sort of gradual awakening as I've been exposed to the nuts and bolts of this business and the resources it requires and the impact that it can have on and the leverage that we have to make improvements. So all of which, occurring, like Casey said, on a backdrop of sort of more intense, more evident, more urgent feeling visibility of climate change. Yeah, happy to be here.
Good. So we all three of you have kind of talked about the past and how you got here. So I may go back to the past, but I'd like to sort of sit in the present for a moment. So present being the last 15, 20 years and what you've been involved in, especially with initiatives. And Eliot, I'm going to go back to you first, just because what are some of the big changes that have happened at White Flower Farm? Because you are kind of at the epicenter of so many of the things that our industry is criticized for. The use of plastic pots, which Danny talked about right before, and so many other things. What have you done? How have you changed the perception of that essential part of our industry?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that we've changed the perception. My philosophy and our philosophy is keep pushing forward, take small bites because we're a small business, and talk about these issues and be forthright about the avenues that we're exploring, what we're learning, what we're doing well at, what we're doing less well at, and treat this as a collaborative initiative. I think we're all rowing in the same direction, and we certainly get criticism from customers and would-be customers about you shouldn't sell this plant, or you shouldn't sell this plant in that pot, or all sorts of stuff. And that's and we, nobody likes hearing criticism, but we take that stuff in stride and focus on the big picture and keep pressing forward.
So I'm going to cheat a little and tell you that I talked to Karen, and she said that you will not probably talk about some of the things that you have done, like the solar arrays, whatever. So could you mention a couple of those sustainable initiatives that you've done at White Flower
Well,
Farm?
there's a couple major ones, and then a more small, less exciting ones, but solar is certainly a big one for us. We've about 6 or 7 years ago, we put in about half an acre of ground mount panels at the nursery. And last summer, or maybe even 2 summers ago, we did the whole roof of our shipping facility in Torrington, Connecticut, which is a pretty sizable building. And solar, as I'm sure everybody knows, has issues its capacity factor among others, but we've taken a big bite out of our electricity usage, and therefore some kind of bite out of our fossil fuel usage, and that feels good. We're doing a lot more rigorous IPM at the nursery than ever, looking to cut out chemicals however, wherever, using beneficial insects, and being conscientious in how we grow. We are getting back into field production after many years of being exclusively greenhouse growers. And part of the impetus for that is the energy costs of growing in greenhouses, especially in our climate. Geez, what am I not thinking of? Yeah, I think that's the big ones, Deb.
Okay. So now I'm going to go back to Casey, and this is where you get to unbury your lead, because I'm actually going to go a little bit, the present, but also the future. Oh, you're actually muted too. But with the students, at present, what are you seeing with the students at present? But what are you hoping? What are your hopes and dreams for the Arboretum, and also for this generation that is learning about horticulture, natural places, et cetera, climate change? How does that fit into all of your duties as the director of the Arboretum at Penn State?
Wow.
I know, was that big or what? I'm sorry.
Yeah. So now I'm going to make it even bigger than that as we talk about it. So the present situation for Penn State, right? When we look at what a large institution it is, and so probably many listeners, and viewers know that it's a very large university located in the center of Pennsylvania. I've talked about how it's a land grant institution. Its land grant ethic, though, extends to 26 different Commonwealth campuses that are spread throughout the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. So it's a big enterprise. So not just students, but we employ 30,000 staff members throughout Pennsylvania, not to mention many students at each of those Commonwealth campuses, almost 100,000 of them strong. So, when we start talking about how the university has sustainable goals, and sustainability as we know it in horticulture extends to those larger goals. So these are things that we can all do locally that then have impacts on what we do regionally, that then have impacts on what we can do globally. So I put in the chat the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. And so many of us know what they are. I'm a card-carrying member for the Sustainable Development Goals. It's not showing up here with my virtual background, but you can go to the website and you can look at the 17 goals. And a public garden and arboretum is where all 17 of those goals come together. So we take that ethic really seriously, and we're trying to extend that out even to the Commonwealth campuses. So I find with our student body, we just, one of the reasons I shared the Sustainable Development Goals is we just hosted one of the youth ambassadors for the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 3 days at Penn State. His name's A.Y. Young. You should look him up. He's got an amazing, very simple, positive message about sustainability. And simple, positive. He promotes what he calls the battery tour. So he's figured out a way to give live kind of hip hop and R&B inspired concerts using fuel cell driven audio and mixing. And it's a great experience because it shows that, this gloom and doom that we sometimes get surrounded with here, you can transform that conversation. And there's no better way and no more enriching way than horticulture and the plant sciences to be able to do that for folks. So part of his visit was a student-run sustainability summit, and we had 100 students there. We had several of us from people who are doing procurement to the university's chief sustainability officer, to the head of finance and planning for Penn State, one of the vice presidents. It was just a great time to get together and talk about all the things that we want to do and aspire to do, and what those challenges are at a large university to do that. So all of us who are in university leadership kind of agreed a lot of the time what we need to do is really listen to what the students are saying, because they're really intelligent and really dialed in, and then figure out ways to make what they want to have happen. So whether it's a community run student farm that's here on campus that I think is amazing, has no formal tie to the Arboretum, came out on its own, but how do we radiate that? How do we make sure that food justice is there, and that we're doing our part for food justice at the Arboretum, that we're doing our part to like Eliot was talking about, make sure that we're treating our plants and our plant selection as, you know, sustainable, adaptable plants. How are we thoughtful in the power that we use? So, you know, yeah, the university has a large solar agreement that's, you know, heading directly toward our goal as a university to be carbon neutral, hopefully by 2030. But, you know, every single thing that we do to maintain and enhance the canopy of trees that are here at University Park, to many other things, because, you know, that idea of planting trees is sustainability and it reduces your carbon footprint. It's not just that, but sometimes we forget that each and every little bit that we do helps.
So an adjunct question to that, are you publishing any of those results? Are you communicating this summit that you had, you know, this, because I think, and this is something that was brought up by Lois, in that she was going out looking for information, and either she didn't find it, or she found bad information, or she found redundancy happening everywhere and nobody knew what was going on. So how is Penn State getting that information?
I think you ask a really good and probing question. So, you know, that's great. That's, as garden communicators, we also occasionally need to be investigative journalists. So, I've been here at Penn State less than a year. I've been here 9 months. So everybody's expectations, I hope, have to be appropriate. But the fact of the matter is, in terms of how I remember sustainability being represented at Penn State, when I really interacted with Penn State a lot in 2006 and 2007, for example, with cooperative extension, and then also looking at composting and organic waste transformation, I have to be honest and say that a lot of that information that was there really hasn't been built upon, and Penn State has strides to make. So no, I haven't had a chance to put my name on any publications here yet. And I don't see a lot of opportunity straight away. That's part of the bridges that we need to build now as Penn State, is making strides in those. And there's a tremendous amount of research on a lot of different things that are tangential to horticultural and public garden operational sustainability that are going on here at Penn State, that will generate results that we can share with the Sustainable Gardening Library. And we can definitely leverage it for our folks who come to the Arboretum. But as of right now, no, that's an opportunity for future success for us.
So Lois and I and another member of the Sustainability Committee have been meeting over time, and we've been talking about, how do we get information out? How do we get people to pay attention to the information that we get out? And I know, Eliot, you have to deal with that all the time. You know, somebody's plant dies and they call up and they say, my plant died. And so you have to go through this whole explanation of how, you know, maybe their next plant won't die if you do X, Y, and Z, or maybe they're just interested in understanding how to capitalize on the success that they did have with a plant they got from you, and what can they do next. So it's our language, you know, and this is maybe a touch off topic, but Lois, and here you're a language person. You're a wordsmith and really good with putting information out there. So with the Sustainable Gardening Library, what is that kind of next step for you, that, you know, you have the information, do you see yourself as being an information generator?
That's only come up recently because I'm working with an in-house marketing communications agency at Montclair State University. It's a bit of a, you were talking about young folks a little earlier, and it's been a little bit of a bumpy ride there. But we've had several interns in the past that produced PowerPoint-based videos, and this semester, one of the gals is producing a 2-minute, video. I haven't seen any of it yet. So we do have a grant this year to get to focus primarily on marketing the library. We've spent the last 2 or 3 years getting those 100 collaborators and those 1,000 pieces of information into the library. And it's on our end, it's very labor intensive. People or organizations are constantly changing their websites. We end up with broken links, and it's a constant struggle to keep everything updated. But I think I'm getting a little far afield from your question.
But
We're focused this year strictly on getting the word out about the library. So that's kind of why I'm here today.
well, plug away. In fact, in the chat, there is a link to the library, and it is up further in, let's see.
I think you have the link to
There
the
you go.
Institute's
yes,
library
okay.
page. But it's very easy to find if you just Google Sustainable Gardening Library. We're like the only one. So
And yeah, I just kind of went and picked up a link and put it in there for Chris to put out. Yeah, information, and what sustainability means. And Casey, you put up there the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which the Sustainability Committee talked about for a little while, and how could we get GardenComm to interact with some of those development goals, and then other things came up that were more important. But again, getting the word out. And so, Eliot, I'm going to pick on you, getting the word out about plants. People think plants are furniture. So how do you communicate? And I know Karen does this all the time because we've talked about it. She's on the phone trying to calm somebody down when their cactus died, or their amaryllis or whatever. Your communication, what kind of, I'm trying to work around to the question that I'm trying to ask. How much do you invest in communication? You have your catalog.
Yeah, we have the catalog, we have our website. We do a lot of email marketing. All of that is in varying degrees research intensive and language intensive. White Flower Farm happens to be a brand with a little bit of a literary pedigree. I don't know that we're living up to that pedigree all the time these days, but we do think about it and talk about it and care about it. Deb, I don't know that we're doing anything like a perfect job of articulating how gardening and sustainability sort of intersect, and how one, how the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. We try to talk about it. We try to keep it simple. We repeat ad nauseum. I think Karen would agree with me that there's oftentimes there's a little bit of a catch-22 in that people certainly want information, are curious, want to learn, but also don't read. You know, so it's, I don't want to, I don't think we're well served by pretending that if we make our catalog full of long form instruction on ecoregions, that that would get read. I don't believe that it would. So, like I said, little bites, rinse and repeat.
Okay, so we have 9 minutes left, and what I'd like to, right now, I don't see any questions. I have a final question for each of you, and I'm trying to remember who hasn't gone first. I think Casey hasn't, I don't know who hasn't gone first yet, but what piece of advice can you give any individual? What piece of advice can you give to how an individual can be sustainable in this industry? From a, what are the things, and this is communication, what are the things that gardeners can do? What can garden communicators do? It could be anyone who's in this industry, a grower, a seller of the plants, garden centers, whatever, a teacher, as you are, Casey, and as a disseminator of information, as you are, Lois. What is that one piece, or maybe a little global kind of piece of thing that you can say, what can that person do to be more sustainable? So let's see, who gets to go first on that one? So Eliot just talked. So Lois, I'm going to pick on you again to be first, and you're muted. Oh, and by the way, the Karen that I keep mentioning with Eliot is Karen Bussolini, who is also on the sustainability committee. And I checked in with her and I said, do you think you could get someone from White Flower Farm on here? And she said, I'll ask. And so that's how Eliot came to be on here. So Lois, what is that piece of information, communication to get for someone to be more sustainable?
Well, for GardenComm members and other professionals, I'd invite them to come explore the online sustainable gardening library. It's not just, you know, a nerdy dictionary type thing. You can find ideas for story starters in there. We have contact information for each of the 100 collaborators, so people to interview with their emails and phone numbers. Public gardens and arboreta to go visit, and for the photographers in the house, you know, to get some great photographs. I did want to address something that Eliot said about the ecoregions, you know, that we've solved that problem for you. We have it on the Sustainable Gardening Library. And I think this, you know, it's a little bit nerdy, but I think people that are more deeply into gardening will understand right away how to use it. It's a map that combines both the USDA's 22 plant hardiness zones with the EPA's 200 level 3 North American ecoregions. So you can look at hardiness zone together with soils, terrain, hydrology, vegetation, wildlife, climate, and previous land use. So all of us here know it's not just the hardiness zone, but, you know, soils have a lot to do with it, as does elevation and a whole bunch of other things. So yeah, that's where I tell, you know, GardenComm members to start. And for people that are just getting started, if we have some newbies here, you know, chunk it down into small bits that you can handle. Start where you are. And if you're inclined, work with your neighbors or your homeowners association to create some green corridors through your yards for birds and wildlife. And you can find lots of examples of how beautiful, well-designed naturalistic plantings can be. And you know, I'm going to say it, Deb, remember everything is connected to everything in the web of life.
Thank you, Lois. So Casey, you get 1 minute.
All right, can do. So first, a little bit of a step back and a retraction. Like when we look in things like the Sustainable Gardening Library, it's not that Penn State is devoid on putting out related
so sorry about
information,
that.
right? So as we talk about things like beneficial insects, and we have a Center for Pollinator Research here at Penn State and a really strong extension program in pollinators that is really very nationally known. So don't want to give that impression. But I think it gets to something else that's part of my last 30 seconds here, which is essentially that we have to figure out a way, as complicated as this is, to make it simple and make it down into digestible bites. And I think, I don't want to put words in Eliot's mouth because he's coming up, but for me, that's the real lesson here that I have to extend to folks, is that we as garden communicators have only so many words that we can put into an article or a blog post. And then we need to assume positive intent on the part of the people who are receiving that information, that they will go get more information. We are there to tantalize them with this one piece of information that inspires them to keep going and keep going and keep going. So if we talk about things you can't do, that's not a inspiring message. But if we say, hey, did you know that just by composting, the simple act of composting can be one of the most important acts that you go through for biology and health and food web of the planet, to reducing carbon impacts. It's massive and it's simple. And leave the thread dangling. Why?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Eliot, you get to follow up. What is that one thing that you want to leave people with?
Yeah, I think my one thing maybe sounds contradictory to Casey, but I don't think it is, because I agree that simplicity and bite-sized information is productive. But I also want people to embrace the complexity of this stuff. I think certainly here, when we try to, take honest reckonings with what we do and how we do it and why we do it, those things are not necessarily simple, can't necessarily be well articulated in a paragraph, much less a sentence. And so on the one hand, simplicity, yes. But on the other hand, we want to give our audience the benefit of the doubt that if and when they do engage on these topics, they're going to do so pretty richly, and they can deal with a full accounting, not just headlines.
So I don't know if Chris is going to come back on for a moment to finish up, but I wish to thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Deborah, for putting all of this together. Thank you to everyone on the Sustainability Committee with GardenComm, and to our panelists. I mean, this is what it's all about, is really communicating everything that you guys are concerned about, that you're working on, and putting that in a place where we can, get that information out. So thank you for joining us here today. It really is an honor to be presenting this information for GardenComm to our listeners here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
and
you.
so long.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.